The sponsor of this episode is Chadwell Supply, an OG in the multifamily industry. Chadwell is the largest privately owned maintenance and repair supplier, and they deliver orders the next day from local warehouses across the United States. To find out how Chadwell Supply will make your day better, visit www.chadwellsupply.com/difference.
Welcome to Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. My name is Chris Caramanica. As a 15-plus year veteran in the apartment industry, I have stories to tell, a desire to hear and tell other stories. As a multiple committee member for NAA, a CAMT advisory board member and a CAMT holder, and a national presenter and educator, I have met and worked with so many great people in our industry at all different levels. This is not going to be a how-to podcast. This is going to be a how did podcast. We are going to explore the how did tales in multifamily maintenance. How did we do it? How did we learn from it? How did we grow? How did we decide not to do it again? Join me as we go beyond the work.
BTW, Getting Back to Basics. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance. Recently, I saw a poll on Facebook in one of the groups that I'm in that asked a very simple question. It asked if back to basics, the term that many of us use in our industry, as well as in our personal lives, or mostly corporate America in general, if it's become cliche. You see, back to basics is an idiom that means to return to a simpler way of thinking or doing something different. It can also mean to focus on the most important, simplest things after ignoring them for a while. For example, a restaurant might need to get back to basics by using fresh ingredients to make simple food. I have differing opinions on back to basics. I use it myself, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly. But back to basics, using the term back to basics or telling a team, telling your company, telling your group that we need to get back to basics implies that you're not doing the basics. That's one opinion, and I'm very careful when I try to say back to basics because I don't want people to take it the wrong way. I don't want people to think that they're not doing the basics of their role, their job, of what an organization is looking for to get out of them and their work. Another way to look at it is sometimes we get so wrapped up in the day-to-day. We get so wrapped up in the emergencies. We get so wrapped up in the news of the day, the emergency of the day, that sometimes we don't necessarily take a step back and go back to the very first things that we learned in our jobs, in our roles, basically the basics. In doing some research for today's podcast, I came across a great quote, and I want to read it. It is from General Colin Powell. And he said that great leaders are almost always great simplifiers. They can cut through the argument, debate, and doubt to offer a solution that everybody can understand. And when I found that quote, it really did make me think of back to basics, right? Sometimes we need to cut through all of the noise, slow down, stop, and really think about what are the basics of a task. A few years ago, back in 2019, I started my own Back to Basics initiative with my maintenance teams and property managers. It was an interesting exercise for me because I had to really sit and go, what are the basics that I learned when I first got into the industry? What are the basics of our jobs? Multifamily maintenance, we're doing so many things on a regular basis. But sometimes it is easy to forget those very simple items that need to be completed on a regular basis. So I spent a little time putting together a program, if you will, where I really broke down some of the routine, I'm going to be saying basics a lot today, basic items that every team member and site needs to be focusing on a regular basis. I want to go over just a few of them, and some of them will go into a little bit more detail. But the first one that always comes up when you talk about what is bare bones basics at an apartment community is its curb appeal. Well, what is curb appeal? We've talked about this a little bit before, and I'm sure I'll be talking about it again in the future. I have my own personal feelings on the focus on curb appeal. I understand the marketing aspects of it. I understand the importance of presenting to the world, your community, having a property that has great curb appeal, beautifully landscaped, constantly clean, not a single thing out of place. But for me, there's some different aspects to curb appeal that I think we lose focus of because we're so focused on the appearance and not necessarily appearance and presentation, and not necessarily the repairs, maintenance, and upkeep that might not always be as visible because we spend so much time on curb appeal. But curb appeal is one of the basics of our industry. So looking at, curb appeal, you break it down into several different areas. Lawn care, making sure that things are regularly mowed, fertilized, watered, plants are healthy. There's no overgrowth. That's your landscaping portion. Then there's your cleaning portion, and making sure that there is no, unsightly debris on the ground, that trash cans are clean. One of my first mentors in this business coined a phrase with me that I still use to this day called neat, clean, and working. And neat, clean, and working is something that is very simple and really could be translated not just to curb appeal, but it could be translated over to work orders. It could be translated over to make readies, shop upkeep, inventory. When you look at something, whether it is a property's curb appeal, a shop, a common area like a fitness center or a community center, you want to make sure that it is neat, clean, and working. Everything is in its place. It has been thoroughly cleaned, and in this day and age, sometimes sanitized, and everything is in working order. So that's kind of your outside, your landscaping, your grounds, your curb appeal. That's the basics. But what is the underlying piece of most of the back to basics initiatives? It's inspections. And that's another basic that we often don't have time for, or that we push aside. So routine inspections are extremely important. Doing exterior inspections, doing your interior inspections, inspecting all of your common areas, your hallways, and your unit inspections. Whether you're a Class A luxury market complex or you are an affordable housing community, apartment inspections are essential, right? People are renting our apartment homes, and it is our responsibility to make sure that they are keeping up with their end of their agreement, to make sure that their apartments are being kept how we expect them to be kept. And quite simply, are they neat? Are they clean? And is everything working? I want to talk about preventative maintenance because this is a really big basic that I think everybody misses. I don't want to say, I know I just said everybody, but I would say most people, it is always a back burner item. And preventative maintenance is one of those constantly brought up things that I will be bringing up on, I've already brought up on previous podcasts, and I know that I'll be revisiting in the future. But if your preventative maintenance tasks are taken care of, you're making sure that your HVAC systems, your plumbing systems, and your electrical systems are all being proactively maintained, then that is going to reduce your work orders. It's going to reduce your make readies and make your lives easier. But it's something that always gets pushed to the back of the line, unfortunately. There's never enough time for preventative maintenance. There's never enough money for preventative maintenance. But we need to carve out time to make sure that those things are happening, because that time and money that we spend now actually saves us exponentially more time and money later. And I know there's a lot of people that are listening right now that are always looking for ways to save money and save on labor costs. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to plan, prepare, and execute a solid preventive maintenance plan. Another one that often gets overlooked in back to basics is safety. It should be key and paramount for all of our team members at sites, from the porter who is taking out the trash to a corporate executive who is walking around in their office. We need to make sure that our properties are safe, not just for ourselves and our team members, but the residents at our properties, the visitors that we have, their guests. Making sure that fire life safety systems are constantly being checked and repairs are being made immediately, that carbon monoxide detectors and smoke alarms are functioning, that they haven't expired, that they're in the right places, that fire extinguishers are looked at on a regular basis. NFPA 25 requires a monthly check of fire extinguishers. But in common area fire extinguishers, you're walking by them every day. If you are not checking them on a daily basis, you may get into trouble when they're actually needed by yourself or your residents. And then your security systems. Most security systems seem to be set it and forget it, but when you need it, if you're not checking your security systems on a regular basis, making sure that all the cameras are working, that the angles are correct, that you have good views, something as simple as making sure that the date and time is correct on your security systems could be, really detrimental when a need arises for you to review security footage. Next, another big pillar of our back to basics is resident and work order management. I think that, it sounds really simple. Just do the work orders in the order they're received and order the materials. But I think a lot of times our focus gets pulled on the most emergent work orders, the emergencies, and we keep pushing back in line work orders that came ahead of other ones because a resident might be complaining the loudest, or there may be an upcoming inspection, or, this resident says they're not going to pay their rent if we don't complete their work orders. So I think it's really important that the basics of work order management is doing work orders, acknowledging work orders, and doing work orders to the best of your ability in the order that they are received. To do that, you need to really efficiently manage and prioritize your work orders. Whether you're doing it on paper or you're doing it in an electronic system, there's ways to sort and filter and make sure that you're taking care of the work in the order that's received, and making sure that we don't forget about items and taking care of them in the order that they were originally put into our system. Emergencies happen. Work orders, myself included, I've been on a work order where I've been replacing something as simple as a light fixture, left the light fixture down and received an emergency phone call for a water heater replacement. Well, that was an emergency. There was a flood. So I had to go and make sure that I took care of the emergency item, and I was able to clean up the water and replace the water heater. But what I didn't do was I didn't do two things. One, I did not leave that light fixture replacement that I was doing in a safe. When I stopped the work, it was not safe for the resident. I had actually exposed wires, and it was a hazard. The light fixture was on the ground. It could have easily been kicked over. Something could have been broken. Somebody could have hurt themselves. So that was the first thing that I did wrong. The second thing I did wrong was I forgot about it. Right. I was so busy worrying about the cleanup of the water heater that the resident called me back later the next day and asked if I was going to come back. And that's poor customer service. But the basics of making sure that when you start something, you need to make sure that it gets completed, because there are safety ramifications. There are customer service ramifications. You want to make sure that you're managing your work orders efficiently and effectively, and never forgetting about something that you had to stop midstream. Let's see. Also, with work order management, it's really important to keep a good inventory in your shops. You want to make sure that you're completing an inventory on a monthly basis. Another basic in our industry is, how do you know what you have in your shop to complete those work orders that are going to come in the future if you're not doing a regular inventory, if you're not doing regular ordering? And it sounds so simple. Spend a couple of hours cataloging every item that you currently have and how many you need, and placing that order. Sometimes our days get away from us and we forget that we ran out of, or we didn't tell anybody that we ran out of the last smoke detector. Well, what if you actually need it? When you actually need it, it's not going to be there. If you're doing a proper inventory on a regular basis, then you can definitely make sure that when you need the supplies and parts that you need, as well as your residents, they're there and ready for you. The last two items are, so we covered work orders. We covered curb appeal, preventative maintenance. The last big basic pillar is make readies. Make ready process, or turnovers or empties, whatever you or your company calls them, is a pretty simple process when you look at it, right? An apartment is completely vacant by a resident, and you have, the time, there's nobody in your way, there's nobody looking over your shoulder, i.e. a resident, like we have with work orders, to actually get a make ready done. But there's a lot of key steps that we often miss or fast track through. When a resident gives notice, one of the most important things that needs to be done, whether it's by your maintenance teams or your operations and office team, is a pre-inspection, and a really good inspection. You want to make sure that when you start that make ready, that turnover, that you have all the materials that you're going to need. So doing a quick 5-minute walkthrough with a checklist might not be the best, quickest, most efficient way. I personally have done hundreds of pre-inspections for apartment turnovers. In my earlier days, they were very quick 5 minutes. Just quick check the box. Don't write a lot of notes. Don't order materials afterwards. What I found over time is that I was spending more time completing a make ready, or my teams were spending more time completing a make ready because of my poor pre-inspection, meaning I didn't document the filter sizes that were needed. I didn't document the age of the smoke detector in the apartment. I didn't check the drains to make sure that everything was running and flowing in at a proper speed. Those little things added up to my team members who were turning the units, because they had to field verify that when a resident had moved out. And that often took them longer because they didn't always have the materials that they needed or the tools that they needed to fully complete that make ready. The last two pieces, I think I covered the next one a little bit, is the importance of documentation and record keeping. It is extremely important, whether you're doing make readies, you're doing preventive maintenance, you're doing work orders. The importance of making sure that everything is well documented on a work order ticket, on a make ready board, on your preventative maintenance schedule, or in your inventory is critical. I know paperwork is not always my friend. If you could see around in my office, you would see piles of paper. I push a lot of paper on a regular basis. But there's plenty of systems out there, whether it is a work order management system, a preventative maintenance system, even online checklists that you can find to help speed up your paperwork, to make sure that you're capturing everything that needs to be captured on these things we talked about. And then maintenance logs, and making sure that you're documenting your preventative maintenance tasks, you're documenting your common area repairs, you're documenting your inspections, to make sure that you have all of that. So you can reference it. You can see if you have recurring issues that are happening on a regular basis, whether it's on a certain system or in a certain building. But those logs are absolutely critical. And then the last piece is training and development. And I think this is really why I started my Back to Basics initiative in 2019. And I did it in 2019. I revisited it in 2021, and I revisited it again in 2023. And I'm planning on revisiting it again in 2025. But in putting together this presentation today in this discussion, it really got me thinking that maybe pushing on Back to Basics every 2 years is not the best thing to do. Focusing on the basics of our jobs and our roles is something that we should be doing every single day. And as a leader, I hope that as I plan for 2025, that I can create a system that I'm working with my regional leadership as well as my on-site teams to make sure that we're always focusing on the basics, that we are constantly sending out reminders. We're constantly looking at those basic things at the site level, because one of the biggest pieces is training and development. And if we're not constantly training our team members on the basics, if we're constantly not training new team members, what happens is that it gets the basics get away from us. We take shortcuts. We forget that we should be doing a pre-inspection on make-readies because we were so busy doing other things for the last 2 months that we just kind of got out of habit and out of routine of doing a basic task, like making sure that units are pre-inspected before they move out. So as I move into 2025, and yes, it is the end of October in 2024, and I'm already thinking about 2025, what I really want to focus on my next Back to Basics initiative is how I am going to make that personally for me and my teams a recurring item that we're constantly talking about, not talking about it for the first 2, 3, 4 months of a year, and then not thinking about it again until the next odd year that rolls around, which is what I've been doing. So that's really what I'm looking at to do in 2025. And what I hope that maybe some of you will take away from this is to really start thinking about what are the back to basics initiatives at your sites? What are the back to basics for our industry that you want to focus on? One of the co-founders of MMN, Mike Brewer, was quoted in, said this great quote in his Multifamily Collective: "Great teams don't just happen. They are built on a solid foundation of basics and consistently reinforced." Let me say that again. Great teams don't just happen. They are built on a solid foundation of basics, consistently reinforced. So I thank Mike for that quote. I was glad I found that on his Multifamily Collective, because that's what I want to do as I proceed going into the next year and in perpetuity, is making sure that the basics of our roles are consistently reinforced. I'm going to leave you one final thought. Back to basics is not a cliche. And I answered no to that Facebook post that I referenced at the top of my conversation today. But I think we need to maybe change the wording of it. Instead of getting back to basics, we need to continually focus on the basics. Thank you for joining me today on Beyond the Work, Tales in Multifamily Maintenance, and I'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for joining me for this episode. No matter how long you've been in our industry or what position you have at your company or your community, everyone has a maintenance story to tell. Go to www.multifamilymedianetwork.com and leave me a voice message or share your information, and we can tell your tale together on a future episode. Please check out our sponsors and like, subscribe, and follow to this podcast or video, and join the Multifamily Media News Network newsletter for upcoming shows and blogs from me and the other great hosts on our network. Our stories all connect us. See you for the next chapter.
Thank you again to Chadwell Supply for sponsoring this episode. Chadwell Supply delivers unforgettable service with next-day delivery, online and in-person maintenance training, and procurement platform assistance to make ordering simpler. Visit www.chadwellsupply.com/difference to learn how Chadwell Supply will make your day